Today's a big day. It's time to turn this block of ebony into 4 bars for our center back slat and prepare it to inlay the silver. I have printouts from the plan. I printed 2 pages where I have the bars because you're going to need a front and a back for each. We're going to cut these out from the sheet. And then I have the page for the center back slat showing me where all the bars are located in the chair. If you've never worked with ebony before, the first thing you'll notice once you buy the ebony is that there's wax all around the ebony, and that's there to prevent checking. So the first thing we need to do is get this ebony off. I have one of my scrapers here. It's one of my junk scrapers, and I just use this to get glue off or wax off of ebony or other things like that instead of actually doing much scraping with it. So I'm going to put this on the bench and we're going to scrape off this wax. Now that the ebony's cleaned off, or for the most part, I got all the wax off, it's time to joint 2 faces. We're not going to thickness plane this. This stuff is just way too harsh on machinery, especially these blades. So we're going to very lightly joint 2 edges. Then we're going to come over to the table saw and use that to square up our other 2 edges. But just very light passes. You know, the grain is so dense here, it's really hard to even read what direction the grain's going. So, and it's such a dense grain, you'll know. You'll make a pass and everything looks fine. That's the way you're going to go. So I'm going to start jointing this guy. It's got a whole bunch of fun stuff in it. It's not anywhere close to being flat. But just take it slow, nice, small cuts, and your machinery will really be thankful for it. We're here at the bandsaw because we don't want to waste any ebony. And ebony is expensive. Not nearly as expensive as some other woods, but it's really high up there. And we want to make the most out of this piece. So now that I've squared up 2 edges, what I want to do is rip down the length of this piece. This piece of ebony is 12 inches long and 1 7/8 inches wide. Now maybe it was closer to 2 inches at one time before I jointed it. But what I want to do is I want to cut a strip down here that's 6/8 of an inch thick. Our thickest bars, which are the 2 bottom bars, are 5/8 of an inch tall, as well as all the bars are 5/8 of an inch thick. And we'll actually be cutting these just a little bit over 5/8 of an inch for the thickness too, because we're going to come back to this bad boy here and resaw the bars before we put them in. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So what I want to do right now is cut a 6/8 of an inch strip out, because the rest of this ebony I'll be able to use for the material to make my plugs. We're going to rip this bar now to thickness. The thickness is 5/8 of an inch on the sheet. However, you really should be doing this a 1/16 of an inch thicker than 5/8 of an inch. And the reason is we're going to resaw this piece on the bandsaw, and I'm accounting for roughly a 1/16 of an inch or so for the kerf on the blade. And that little bit extra that's wider than the kerf will get us a little bit extra to sand down to, and when we fit it in, we chamfer for the edges, it'll look great. So instead of having this at 5/8 of an inch for my thickness right now, my fence, which is 10/16, I have it set for 11/16. Make sure when you cut this, you have some kind of a push stick, because we're really close to the blade right now. And this little plywood push stick is great because if it gets into the blade a little bit, I don't really care. And I can just make a new one whenever I want. So let's rip this piece. Now that this is cut to thickness, I'm going to take my pencil and write, I'm just going to put some F's for front and some B's for back. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to know before I cut these guys to the actual bars which way I should be cutting them. I don't want to screw up. So I'd rather just be safe and sorry and cut these guys and label it and make it dummy proof. So as you can see, I got some B's on the back and some F's on the front, and this will be the thickness of the bars. Okay, now it's time to make another cut on this, and we're going to square this up on 4 sides. I'm going to cut this at 5/8 of an inch as well. I'm actually going to defend to 5/8 an inch. And 5/8 of an inch is the height of the 2 lower bars. Once we cut this to get our height for the 5/8 of an inch, then I'm going to put my crosscut sled on and cut my 2 bars away, which are going to be, I think, 2.5 inches long each. I got here my stack of bars. Now the first 2 were relatively easy. The second 2 just took a few more steps. So what I did was I cut the middle bar to length at the same thickness or height, as these, set it aside. Then I squared up one end of this bar, went over to the bandsaw, marked this to length, and then at the bandsaw cut it just wider than or longer than the total length. Came back to the table saw, and with a piece of plywood on my fence to extend the fence, I just eyeballed where my pencil mark was for my length and cut this piece to length on the table saw. Then, with the crosscut sled off, I brought both of these pieces over and I cut them for their height, reducing a 1/16 of an inch for the middle and then another 1/16 of an inch for the top bar. Now with my stack of bars, let's go cut out our drilling guides and get towards making some holes for our inlay. I have a printout from the plan here, and you need to print 2 of these pages, and we're just going to come in and cut away these blocks. These are all at the correct sizes, so you make sure when you print this, you print it at regular size and not any other settings. So we'll bring our straight edge in. And I'm going to cut just longer than the actual piece itself. And then I can free these. Now with those 2 bottom bars cut, I want to take my long bar here. There is no upside to this. They're both equally spaced all around. Everything should be the same. Grab some blue tape, and I'm going to tape my paper to my bar. Right, I got one side done. What we're going to do is drill the holes for this side and then take the piece off and then drill the holes on the other side. I have an 1/8 inch brad point bit chucked up in my drill press right now, and before I drill into this guy, I want to drill into some 1/2 inch plywood and make sure that the bit is the same size as I think it is. This piece of silver here is 0.128 inches thick, so that should be the same thickness as that drill bit. So I'm going to drill into here and see how this fits. Okay, I got a little hole. Take my sterling silver. Yep, it's a nice tight fit. Now, if you don't know where to buy this stuff, don't worry. I have links on this chapter of where you can go to order this, the size, and all that fun stuff you need. But now that I know that that brad point pit is a good size for this sterling silver, and it matches my thickness of my sterling silver, now it's time to drill this ebony bar. What we want to do is line up our brad point to our center of each one of these circles. So you can see here I got the circles on the bar. Alright, finished drilling all of our holes on our first side. I'm going to take the tape off. And there you have it. There's all of our holes. Now this is great because later on, not yet, later on, we're going to take our silver. There we go. And we'll snip it before, get it in there, super glue it inside. And then we'll have all of our little silver pieces here. We'll flatten them with a file, round them off with a little bit of sanding, and we'll have this really nice inlaid pattern. Same in the original chair. So I'm going to do the same for the back. Get that guy on here and just drill these guys out. I have the back clamped up, and just like before when we were clamping the chair up, I made sure that the rear apron was 17 inches from the bottom. I have the crest rail so that the square, when it comes down, has the same distance on both the top, both the right and the left tops of the crest rail. So everything here is set just like it would be when we finally glue up the chair. Now, after I cut my blocks, I went over to the bench and I cleaned them up on the bench with my plane, my bronze smoother, and they look great, nice and square. Maybe a little bit of sanding at 600 grit or so, and we'd be ready to rock and roll, or 320 then up to 600. And then after that, I went over to the table saw, and I took some really thin, less than 1/8 of an inch MDF, and what I did was I cross-cut it to different lengths. And those lengths are all in the plans. In the plan, there's a sheet like this, and it shows the back of a whole bunch of spacing in it, and distance is marked out. And I use this to make these. So what these are spacers, and they're the exact same width as the bars, and they're the height from the crest rail, from the top of the rear apron up where the bars are supposed to be. So for instance, there are 4 of these, and the first one is 2.5 inches wide and 2 inches tall. And then the second one is also 2.5 inches wide, but it's 3 3/8 of an inch tall. And so on and so forth until you get this third one, which is the width of the middle bar, the third bar up, and then the height I believe on this is 7.5, and then the height on the smallest bar on the top is 10.5 inches in the width of the bar. The next thing I did with these is I marked center on both the bottom and the top for each one of these. And I came over to the back of the chair and I marked center for myself on the back of the chair so that I can then take these guys, line it up with the rear apron, and then mark out where my bars are supposed to go. So let's get to it. Yesterday I finished fitting the front 4 bars into the center back slat. I did a little bit of thinking on the whole process, and I think we should do something slightly different. And here's what I think we should do. When you have this all clamped up, which is the rear apron, the legs, the crest rail, and the center back slat, we use these little spacer guys to place where our bars are going to end up being. That's fine. What we shouldn't do is when we use the spacer and the bar, we should not knife with a marking knife the edges of the bar. And the reason is I probably built 6 of these chairs now, and half of the time I've done this right, and the other half of the time, I wouldn't say right, actually I got lucky. And the other half of the time, I had to do something else, which was what I'm about to do in the video. And what happened was this center back slat, when I went to fit the tenons into the mortises, I had to make the piece wider. I actually physically had to pull it apart a little bit and get it into this rear apron. That's not good when we're trying to fit the bars into the rear apron, into the center back slat, that is, when it's not in the rear apron. So let's use the spacers, pencil around the bars. Then when we come and router the waist away with the router and the router bit, we'll come close to our lines but not go all the way to our lines. And then once we've routed that space away for these bottom two, let's put this guy, the center back slat, back into the rear apron. With it back into the rear apron, now we have the correct amount of spacing. And then we can use our bars and our chisel, and if you want, you can even knife it then, using the lines from the pencil as your base lines, and knife around it, and then start to chisel the waist away. So we're looking at the chair clamped up. This is the inside of the chair. The outside's back here. And you'll notice right here, there's a difference between color of the fresh mahogany and the mahogany. This was covered by some parts on my bench next to the window, or table next to the window, and so this part of the mahogany has aged a little bit with the sun touching it and causing the color change. So the idea is going to be to take each one of these guys. So here's the first one. This is 2.5 inches wide and 2 inches tall. To line it up with that center mark on the top of the crest rail. And then take one of our bars and to line it up to the piece. Now I know to position that bar and where it is and on the crest rail and how it should be centered. So once you get that bad boy there, as I said earlier, instead of using a marking knife here, let's take a pencil and pencil around your ebony bar on 3 sides, remove the spacer, and then pencil around the bottom of the bar while holding it in place the entire time. Once you finish your first bar, go ahead and continue doing the rest of the bars using each spacer centered on the rear apron. Here you'll see now I've marked all of my bars with pencil, and they are ready to have the waist routed out with the router. We have one more thing to do here, and that's to get our 2 sides of our center back slat to meet our 1/8 inch hole that we drilled earlier. To do this, I take a piece of hardwood, happens to be oak here, and using the mounting spray and some sandpaper, I adhere the sandpaper to the hardwood. And with that adhered, I start to sand up the 2 sides of my center back slat until I make them meet my 1/8 inch hole. Now I use the hardwood because it's less likely to bend and it'll follow the shape of our center back slat. Make sure to sand all the way up to 220 here. With everything marked out, it's time to start routing away the waist. I have my little DeWalt guy here, and I don't have the plunge base on for reasons. I actually like doing it with this base instead because 1, it's a smaller base, and 2, I feel as though I have a better visibility with this base. So I'll just by hand do some passes, shut it off, change the height, do another pass, change the height, do another pass. This is a 3/16 of an inch bit with a 5/8 inch length cutting area. So I have enough cutting length to get through this entire piece. So the idea here is we're going to run the router and remove waste all the way through. And that's why I have these two pieces I used for my clamping cauls when I clamped up the pieces that made the back for the bent lamination. And I got these guys here. The top one's going to be sacrificed as waste. I've already drilled into it before when I put the 1/8 inch hole in the top. It's clamped up. Those two boards here are clamped up to the back and the front as well as towards the center. And these clamps will need to move as we do this work, as we move up the piece. But I'm going to throw some safety gear on and stay away from my lines, and then come in with some chisels and clean this up. So let's get to it. Once you have routed away the waste for the first bar, go ahead and route away the waste for the second bar, making sure to stay within your lines. Now, to avoid the mistake that I made, which you'll see right here, which is the bars are not long enough to fit into the material I removed the first time around in my center back splat. What you should do instead is, with a square and a pencil, mark a line across the depth of both bottom bars. Head over to the bandsaw and resaw both of these bars in half. Those lines will help you match up those bars later on. With both bars resawn, imagine here that the center back splat is in the rear apron, and just slowly work back to those lines. I'm working back to the pencil lines, but if you want to then take your bar, align it to the pencil lines, and mark around with a knife, you're more than welcome to. Just keep working back to those lines. Make sure not to go any deeper than 3/4 of the way. And that's just to help prevent you from going all the way through and blowing out material on the other side. Keep working until you get a nice fit for that lower bar. Slowly paring away material. In this shot, you'll see that you have the center back splat in the rear apron, and now I'm working to get that top half of the bar into the mortise. Let's see. You'll see I'm pushing it down, and it's fitting really well. Oh yeah, we're there. Nice and tight. See if we can get it in. Just need to go down a little bit lower on the right. I'm going to flip it over. Test the height in the back. Okay, just a little bit more would be nice, but I'm not going to do it. I figure I can probably get there with enough hitting on the dead blow hammer. So I'm going to say this one's in and it's good. Let's work on the second one. Now I'm cutting to some footage where I was fitting the upper bar into its mortise with the lower bar fitted into the center back splat. What you want to do is have your center back splat still inside of your rear apron after you fit the lower bar. Align the upper bar to the lower bar using the ruler. Knife around the bar once you've positioned it properly, and then come in and remove material with your chisel just like you did on the first bar, slowly moving back to your lines. Okay, we're there width-wise, we're just tight thickness or height-wise. Yeah, there's no getting that in. You can see that we're nice and tight over here. and here. And that's all right up on top. And let's remove some material. Ooh, much nicer. Yes, almost there. Okay, so that left a little bit of material here on the bottom. That's telling me that I'm in this deep, and down here I got to remove material and bevel back. And that's what I'm going to do. Let's give it another shot. Oh, feels good. Yes. That's all hand pressure. Oh, I think we're there. Okay, looks good from the top. Let's, this is the number 1. Let's try our number 2. Oh yeah. Look at that. Nice reveal. We have a good amount of material on both sides. I think we're there. This is great. I'm gonna pop these two guys out. And the next thing you want to do is to grab some sanding blocks and sand up through your grits around the area where these 2 bars are. Because once we glue these in, you won't get a chance to easily sand the surface of the center back splat again. Now what we want to do is take our bars and just put a slight chamfer around all 4 sides. Make sure to do the end grain first and then do the long grain. Okay, it's time to glue these guys in. I'm going to take a bamboo stick here and a little bit of glue. And I'm only going to apply glue to the inside. And not very deep. And I'm staying away from the edges. Let's get number 1. Lines here up on top. Once you've gotten the bar down a little bit, flip the whole assembly over, and with the mating ebony bar, you want to check the depth on the sides, see if you're down far enough. If you're not, do what I did and grab another piece of wood and then strike that with your dead blow hammer. That way you're protecting the ebony bar. And then check your progress again, see if you're at the right depth. And if you're at the right depth, then it's time to glue in the second bar. So just like on the first bar, get a little bit of glue all the way around, knock it in. If you need to, hit a little bit harder with the block, flip it over, check the depth. And if you like the depth, that's good. Here you'll see me flip the board, or the whole assembly that is, back over. And I'll start tapping in on that left corner that I'm pointing to because it's a little bit, it's not down far enough. So I just tap that corner in and make an adjustment. Don't forget to flip over the board and clean out all the squeeze out from these 2 bars. We don't want any squeeze out because when we put the bars in for the back side, the last thing we want is glue to be in the way between the 2 bars meeting in the middle. Alright, these guys are glued in, they look great. I'm gonna let them sit for an hour or 2, go have some dinner, come back, and then start routing out the locations for the upper two bars. Just a real quick to show you, everything looks really nice. Good reveal all the way around. And we'll just have to sand and polish these up a little bit later. But until then, let's let this guy sit. And just like before, I have the clamps holding this masonite covered boards here, and I'm going to use them as a backer. Everything's nice and tight, and I'm just going to take my router and remove some waste. I just finished getting the middle, or I don't know if it's the middle, but I call it the middle bar in, and now it's time to get the top bar in. And I've already picked my side, got my layout lines there, and I'm just going to start working back to those very slowly. Just taking a little bit of time. See what the fit's like. Okay, we're good. Lengthwise, or this direction, we're good. Now it's time to pair it to the other direction. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's good. Now it's just time to relieve material in the down direction. Okay, we're definitely tight, and that's okay. So just as before, we're gonna take a look at the piece, see where it tells us we're tight, and attack. Okay, time for another test fit. Oh yeah, much better. Much better. Yeah, we are there. Great, let's get this out, put on some chamfers, and glue it in. Okay, we're all chamfered on all four sides. And before we do that, just like before, we're going to do a little bit of sanding. Moving up to the 220 grit. Okay, it's time to glue up. A few hits with the hammer. All right, it's been a really good session in the shop. I have the front half of the first 4 bars in. Everything sanded at 220 around it. We're 3/4 of the way deep already, and all we gotta do now is focus on our back. And that'll be, for me, for the next day. I'm gonna let all this finish gluing up overnight. I let a couple hours go in between each section, so these 2, and then I did this guy, and then about an hour later I did this upper guy up here. But everything's in, it's nice and fit. Great look, let me show you. That's got a really good fit. Nice reveals. You can see all the way around. Looking really good. Looking really good. Can't wait to get the sterling silver in, but that'll be for another day after we get the back bars in. So